taking portrait photographs, and because it blends in something that I want to learn more about, which is to create an effective essay that shows who a person is in a more robust way than a single photo can. The final assignment for this project is to create a photo essay on someone that you find interesting. I'm hoping students can learn fundamentals such as light and composition, finding someone that you find interesting, a friend of a friend, someone you may know through social media, and reaching out to them to more complicated tasks like making someone feel comfortable and at ease getting their photo taken. The time commitment for completing this project could vary. It might take you a little while to find a subject that you're interested in. Actual shooting time shouldn't be too long, maybe an hour, 2 hours at the most. When you finish with your project, you should upload to the site a couple of things. First, I would like to see your final set of photos that are part of your photo essay. And an optional upload would be kind of your outtakes. I think it would be cool to see the photos that you took that maybe you didn't like so much. And that way I can kind of see what you didn't like versus what you did like and how you got there. Thanks so much for signing up for my class. I'm so happy that you're interested in what it is that I do. I'm really excited to see what it is that you guys do on this project. Let's get started. Setting is really important. I think it contributes to a photo in a big way. I think you have to connect it to the person in a way, and I think that's what makes kind of what we're trying to do today interesting. So you think about who the person is and kind of what they do and why they do it, and you kind of figure out some place or some thing that's connected to that. So with Noah today, like as soon as she said, like, I make these giant pomegranate sculptures because I found a pomegranate in my backyard and I thought that the way that it was formed was really cool. This is the actual pomegranate tree where she got the idea for the glass pomegranate seeds that she's gonna have in her next installation. So just having her kind of talk, this little space right here was just a neat place to put my lens. So I'm getting the tree in the kind of blurred in the foreground, but I'm gonna have her kind of under the tree where she's kind of explaining the compression of the pomegranate and the structure and how it works. Which I've never really thought about a pomegranate so much, but it was kind of interesting to hear what inspires her to make her installation. So I just thought it was kind of a neat shot right here in the yard. The setting is often kind of an obvious choice, but sometimes I think you can work a little harder and get something a little bit more interesting. But I think it's really important to show that setting instead of just kind of a three-quarter portrait. Say, this is a chef. Well, all right, that's neat. That's a great photo, but like, what's it look like where they work? Like, show me them working, like that energy. And those kind of photos, I think, can be really cool. If a student likes a particular setting and they think the light is cool or they think there's some kind of energy there, I would encourage them to try that out. I don't think you need to determine 100% that it's going to work. If you're feeling good about it, that's good enough for me. I would say go ahead and try that spot out. The next thing to think about is framing. So when we were walking around shooting, there was some stuff that didn't quite work because the background was a little messy or a little noisy. The angles didn't quite work. When we were in her studio, like, I had to change lenses because I couldn't quite get the long lens to work in there, where I couldn't stand where I wanted to stand. I think that's what happens a lot. If you feel like you can't stand where you want to stand to get the photo, then you kind of have to rearrange things a little bit and make the setting a little bit more yours. Some other examples are we wanted to see her kind of talk about a pomegranate. We tried that kind of over in her studio area, but determined that the light wasn't that great and it wasn't that pretty over there. So we kind of moved again back into her yard, and I think it kind of lended itself to a little more photogenic setting. To make a subject comfortable, that's a great question. I think that's probably one of the most important things, at least for me. I think one thing I like to do is leave the camera, put the camera down for a little bit. I rarely, if ever, just come in and start taking photos right away, because I think that kind of sets like a weird mood. You have this barrier in between you and the subject right away. So you're trying to take that barrier away. You're trying to make the subject and you, the photographer, comfortable. So if you hold a camera up in between you, just like physically there's something in between you that it just doesn't really feel right away. So I just kind of keep the camera down and just talk and see who it is that you're talking to and say hello. Today, for example, Noah was telling us about her work and who she is and the kind of stuff that she's building, and that gave me a few ideas. So through talking to Noah, I had a few ideas of shots that I wanted to take, and I was able to say, hey, no, I think this might be a cool shot over here. And then kind of telling the subject what you want to do and what your idea is, I think in a way gets them kind of involved and gets them excited about taking photos as well. So kind of take your time, get to know the person a little bit, let them get to know you a little bit. Share an idea or two. I think if you make the subject part of the shoot, your teammate in this, which they really are, then they're going to be a little bit more excited. So when you're shooting your subjects, there's a few different style of shots you might want to keep in mind to help you tell the narrative. Beyond just kind of the three-quarter portrait, which I encourage you to go ahead and do one of those and get a nice photo of your subject. But think about some different approaches and different compositions that you can make that kind of show the person working and kind of has a little bit of energy. So today for Noah, she has a couple of different workspaces that we worked in. In her studio where she works at the computer, this is certainly not my trademark shot by any means. It's a really popular shot, and I think it works for a lot of reasons. But you kind of do an overhead of the person working, and so you kind of have it's a perspective play. So you're kind of in the person's seat, like seeing them. So in Noah's example, she was working on the computer. We had her nice desk and the windows behind her computer, and so it was really neat to kind of take that overhead shot to kind of get that perspective. I think that's a really effective shot. Perhaps not the most original, but I think it works. It works in a really neat way. Outside here, we had that really strong thing. One of the first things she said to me was she was inspired by the objects in her garden. So it became obvious that, okay, so we really have to get some neat wide-angle shots of her in her garden. So if you meet this person, it's like, oh, this garden really inspired me to create all this stuff, and then you just have just a three-quarter portrait of her against a tree. Well, you don't really, well, what's the garden like? So she had some really interesting things here. She has these chickens and these kale plants and all these beautiful greens that are behind her home. So I thought it really made sense to get kind of a wide shot of that stuff, kind of showing this area that she spends a lot of time in and is inspired by. So I would encourage students to kind of think about, okay, what inspires this person, and how can we get kind of a nice photo of them in that area that inspires them, around the things that inspire them. If they play music and it's a specific instrument, well, try to think of creative ways to have them work with the instrument and create a little bit of energy there. So I brought two prime lenses, a wide angle and more of a longer lens. So that's going to let me shoot both environmental stuff and then maybe a few closer portraits. Can we pull this bench out to like here?
Yeah, I should probably take these off.
Sure, yeah. How much does it cost to make one of them?
About $600.
Okay. Yeah. Probably should have asked that later.
Yeah. The labor and material costs.
Wow. Okay, so let's maybe set it down here. It'll kind of throw off the balance of the composition. It just helps me kind of, I mean, that camera and the iPhone aren't even the same aspect ratio, so it's not perfect, but it helps me kind of see if it's going to look good inside of a frame, you know? I can exclude whatever and just kind of see what the balance looks like. So when she said she wanted to move the bench to the side, I just looked at the phone and just realized that was going to throw the balance off, and I wasn't going to like the shot anyway. So we just bagged that. So now we're going to try something different to kind of show the same work, but in a different way. When composing a frame, I trust a lot of my instincts at this point. I don't really spend a lot of time like checking any lists, but I certainly used to. One thing that I find that I do is I always look through the frame. There's always something in the background that bothers me. It used to drive me crazy when I would get photos back or get film back or put photos on my computer. I'd be like, I wish that wasn't there. Why didn't I see that? And so that was kind of funny we're talking about this now, because that happened today. I was shooting Noah in her space in the garage area, and there's like this thing hanging down in the background, and so when I was taking her photo, it looked like this bar was kind of coming out of her head, which just was driving me crazy. It's not very clean. So when you're taking your photos, think about the composition, think about the framing front to back. So in other words, if it were a 3D box, think about everything that's in the photo, from the foreground to the middle ground to the background, and say, well, is there anything in there that's really bothering me there? It's messy. And just clean it up out of there. Keep it neat. Do you have any pomegranates that are kind of ripe right now, or?
I have one that I saved, but it's a little past its prime.
That's okay.
Should I grab it?
Yeah, yeah. Let's see what it'd look like if you grabbed maybe one of the smaller ones and then the real pomegranate. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Maybe kind of lean on your bench a little bit. That's perfect. Stay just like that. Can you brush your hair back on your right side so I can see your face? Perfect. You can use lines in a really nice way. I have a golden ratio tattoo, so I spent some time thinking about how you can use leading lines to really draw you into a photo, and how different shapes make sense. So when we shot Noah in her garden, I found something that I really liked, because the vegetable boxes kind of led back to her, but there was also a nice shape at the top from the tree kind of overhanging. So it's kind of a lot of stuff coming by to frame her, and kind of perfectly in the center back of the frame, but also having like the pomegranate tree above me and the greens beside me, and that's the stuff that really inspires her. Yeah, kind of right there. Kind of face forward towards me. So I'm putting my camera right kind of under her face to get a good light measurement for where she is. So there's a neat arch in the tree branch behind you that I kind of want to fit you in. 3, 2, just kind of relax. Maybe shake your hair out a little bit. So I just want to push this one out a little bit to give it a little bit more balance. Kind of flap her, yeah. Can we do that again? So I think that kind of hopefully made for a strong composition, because we had these, it's just really easy for the eye to get to her while kind of getting to see the stuff that inspires her. So again, keep your compositions clean. Think about shapes. Think about how it's going to lead your eye into the photo. Look at the corners. Like, is there anything messy in the corner? If you're cropping the photo, don't land on something weird. Like, should it be in the photo or should it be out of the photo? Shouldn't really be half. So you want to just keep it clean from front to back and in the corner. So again, keep your compositions clean, keep the shapes interesting and dynamic. Think about who it is that you're shooting, and create a shot list that kind of matches that person and what it is that they do. I think working with a person can lead to some unexpected results. You never quite know what they're going to say or what they're going to do, or kind of what the photo will look like. To work with someone and to get a set of photos, or even one photo that's just really shows who they are and is a beautiful looking photo and is interesting to look at, and I think that's really hard. I like to learn. I like to mess up. I think I've made so many mistakes. I've taken tens and tens of thousands of really awful photos, and I will, and I'll keep doing that, because that's how I learn to make good ones. And I think when you're shooting with people, you make a lot of bad photos and their mouth is open and their eyes look weird, or the movement's not right, or the composition's a little off, and you just didn't quite nail it. And it's kind of that chasing the dragon of the perfect portrait photo that keeps me kind of fired up in doing it. So when I'm setting up to shoot, light is probably what I think about the most. Today we kind of ran into two things. It was a really cloudy day, so outside the light is really nice and even. We kind of talked about that a minute ago, but inside it was very dark because there wasn't much light coming through her windows. So we kind of won and lost today. But so light's obviously very important. I think the light right here is really cool. Even though it's going to hurt us when we go inside, there's like a big softbox in the sky right now, right? So imagine a room full of lamps, and none of those lamps have a lampshade. That's kind of like what a sunny day at noon is like, right? I don't know what is going on in the sky, but it's just right kind of where that plant is just really a nice pop of light right there. And then if you put a shade on them, the light is diffused and really soft and even. Like there's no shadows anywhere today. And it's very like soft light, easy to work with. It's gonna make the photo sharper. It's gonna make the colors pop more. They're not gonna be as washed out. It's just more soothing to the eye to look at, I think. If you're using natural light, then you're kind of bound to the space. Like her front room is really cool and the printer is really cool, and seeing where she works, I think that would make a rad photo, but there's no light coming in. So that can kind of handicap you a little bit. Maybe lean back a little bit. That's great, that's cool. So it's neat to see like the whole display. Let me try a few more at a different exposure. So this is called bracketing. So a lot of people bracket for HDR. They'll take the same shot at different exposures and then they'll stack them together. What I'm doing now, I'm shooting film and this room's a little dark and I'm a little nervous about it. So I'm going to shoot at different shutter speeds. I'm shooting wide open. But I'm going to shoot at a few different shutter speeds. One that's pretty slow and that might make the photo blurry, and one that's a little faster that might make the photo dark. So that way, when I get the film back, I can see, you know, oh, I held it tight and it wasn't as blurry as I thought, or, you know, it's not as dark as I worried. So I'll have a few options. So I always like to, if I'm nervous about an exposure, I'll just shoot it a couple different ways. So I don't like mixed light, so I want to expose just for the natural light that's coming into the garage, and I don't want kind of the mixed yellow light kind of messing up the exposure. And I always hate when those go together. I think it looks bad. And then in the chickens, the way that the plants are is kind of a natural line down that will lead the eye kind of back to her. And the reason I pushed her so far back in that space is because the tree that I was under was kind of blocking the light closer to me. So it's gonna, what I hope it looks like is I'm gonna have the branches from the tree at the top, on the top frame line. And at the bottom frame line, it's gonna be the lines of the plants kind of leading to her. That's my idea. We'll see if it works. It's the fun of film. Once I capture a photo, a couple of things happen. It depends on if I'm shooting film or digital. If I'm shooting film, I have a lab that I like to have them processed at. Usually I'll just get them processed and I'll scan them myself. There's not really much. That's kind of the beauty about film. It saves you a lot of time because there's not a lot of editing that really has to be done. Maybe just a little touch of contrast here, or kind of clean up the edges, kind of make the crop look a little bit better if you didn't quite nail it in camera. It's small tweaks to exposure, and that's pretty much it. I really don't color correct film at all. I think it really looks beautiful on its own. If it's digital, there's a longer workflow. I'll upload everything onto my computer and to a hard drive, and then I'll bring it into Lightroom. I use Lightroom to process. And I'll just do a run through and I'll delete a bunch of like obvious no's. And then I'll take another pass through where I'll pick my selects. So you go through maybe 100 photos and there'll be 40 that you liked. And then I'll go through those and I'll do one more pass where these are the ones, out of those 40, these are the 5 that I really like. And I'll add those to my quick collection, which is a neat feature on Lightroom. And then once I've done that, then I'll edit those 5. And maybe I'll batch edit the other 35 just to kind of have them all looking alike. But it's kind of like whittling down. Obvious no's, okay, these are kind of interesting. These are the ones that I really like. And maybe this is the one that I think is probably the winner from this whole set. Sequencing photos is tough. It's a really hard skill to learn. I think there's a lot of stuff to think about. You think I have to think of how the photos flow together from beginning to end. You know, every story has a start, a middle, and an end. There's kind of an arc to it, and you have to keep the photos in an order that kind of keeps that arc true. it's very basic in a way because you just think about how does the story of today go? Like what would it make sense for the photos to look like? So it can be in a linear fashion, like this is the beginning of the day, middle of the day, end of the day. Or you can sequence it in a way that's, the colors and the light is kind of in order, or the shapes kind of flow together. So maybe you're missing something. So usually I'll have a friend kind of take a look with me if it's something I'm really working hard on. Because by the time from a photo is born and a little gleam in your eye to you drop the shutter down to you edited it or got the film back, that you've thought about that photo a lot or spent a lot of time about that photo. So there's probably some stuff that you're missing, and maybe you're sick of seeing it so much that you're not really looking at it with a fresh eye. So I think it's important to have maybe a friend or two kind of take a look for you and help you out. Students can self-evaluate their own work and process on this project in a couple ways. I think the first thing I would ask them to do is pick one photo that they shot that they really, really love and ask why does it work for them, what do they like about it, what makes it really interesting to them, and where do they think they succeeded in that photo. And then second, I would ask them to pick one photo that just was so bad, it was just a complete failure, really messed it up, it didn't quite work out the way you had in mind, and exposure isn't good or the composition isn't good, and just think about the reasons why you don't like that photo. I think it's important to spend some time looking at your misses and thinking about what you did wrong, because then you'll start to think about how you could have done it differently next time. When commenting on each other's work, I would just ask that they be nice. Keep in mind that everybody's doing the best that they can or trying hard. I think constructive criticism is an important part of art, and we should all be able to offer help to others in a constructive way without being afraid of being critical. But I think at the same time you got to be nice and respectful of the person and who they are. So I think if you're going to say, you have some negative criticism, try to think about some positive things that you have to say as well, so you're not just being negative only.